In September 2003, archaeologists digging in a limestone cave on the Indonesian island of Flores hit something that fundamentally broke the rules of human evolution. 6 meters down in the damp mud, they exposed the top of a skull. It was tiny, about the size of a grapefruit. At first, the team assumed they had found a child. It was the only logical explanation. But as they brushed away the sediment and exposed the teeth, the logic fell apart. The teeth were heavily worn, showing the clear grinding patterns of a lifetime of chewing. The wisdom teeth had fully erupted. This was not a child. This was a fully grown 30-year-old woman. And she stood just 3 feet 6 inches tall. They nicknamed her Flo. And she was about to ignite the most vicious scientific war since the discovery of the Neanderthals. According to every textbook available in 2003, Flo was an impossibility. By the time she died 60,000 years ago, the world belonged to Homo sapiens. We were tall, we had massive brains, and we were conquering the planet. Evolution was supposed to be a one-way street toward bigger, smarter, and more complex humans. But Flo defied that trajectory. Her brain was 400 cubic centimeters, roughly the volume of a chimpanzee's. Her shoulders were hunched forward like an ape's. Her feet were abnormally large and flat. She looked like a creature that had walked out of a time machine from 3 million years ago. Yet, there she was, buried in the same sediment layers as the sophisticated stone tools and the charred bones of cooked animals. The scientific community exploded. If Flo was a legitimate species, it meant our understanding of the human family tree was not just incomplete, it was wrong. For 20 years, the debate raged. But in August 2024, a team of scientists published a study that finally ended the war. They did not just find a new bone, they found the smallest adult human arm bone in the history of the fossil record. And it revealed not only that these hobbits were real, but that they had been surviving on their remote island fortress far longer than anyone dared to imagine. To understand why this discovery is so paradigm-shifting, we have to go back to the moment the Hobbit War began. When Australian archaeologist Mike Morwood and his Indonesian colleague Thomas Sutikna started digging at Liang Bua Cave, they were not looking for a new species. They were looking for the ancestors of the Aboriginal Australians. They expected to find Homo sapiens. Instead, they found LB1, the official catalogue name for Flo. When paleoanthropologist Peter Brown first examined the skeleton, the calculations seemed wrong. A hominin weighing just 55 pounds with a brain 1/3 the size of a modern human, surviving on an island filled with predators. When he published the paper naming the new species Homo Floresiensis, the media dubbed them Hobbits. The backlash was immediate and ferocious. Tuku Jacob, the grandfather of Indonesian paleoanthropology, argued that it was biologically impossible for a creature with a brain the size of a chimp's to make stone tools. Therefore, Flo had to be a modern human, just a sick one. He proposed she suffered from microcephaly, a condition that shrinks the brain. Others piled on with diagnoses like Laron syndrome, a form of dwarfism, or cretinism. The skeptics argued that the Hobbit was just a tragic, diseased individual. For a decade, the sick human hypothesis dominated the debate, but it had a fatal flaw. Excavators at the cave kept finding more bones. Between 2003 and 2004, they recovered remains from at least 15 different individuals. They were all tiny. They all had the same sloping forehead and primitive wrists. If this was a disease, it was a pandemic that selectively targeted every single person in the cave for thousands of years. The statistical probability was 0. Then, in 2016, a new dating analysis cleared up the timeline. Originally, researchers thought Flo lived as recently as 12,000 years ago. The new data pushed that back to 50,000 years ago. This proved they were an ancient lineage, but it left a massive hole in the story. Where did they come from? How long had they been there? The answer was waiting 75 kilometers east, in the sun-baked grasslands of the Soa Basin, at a site called Mata Menge. This site is much older than the cave, dating back 700,000 years. In 2016, researchers found a jawbone and 6 teeth here. They were unmistakably human, but they were shockingly small, even smaller than the teeth found in the cave. This gave researchers a clue, but without a limb bone, they could not be sure of the body size. Then came the mistake that broke the case. Back in 2013, excavators at Matamenga had unearthed a tiny, weathered splinter of bone. It was broken, just 88 millimeters long, and covered in concrete like sediment. The field team bagged it, labeled it crocodile bone fragment, and threw it in a storage box. It sat there, ignored, for 2 years. In 2015, a curator decided to clean it up. As the sediment was removed, the shape became clear. It was not a reptile. It was a humerus, the lower half of a human upper arm bone. It took nearly a decade to fully analyze, but in August 2024, a team led by Yusuke Kaifu of the University of Tokyo published the results. This single shard of bone is the smallest adult human fossil ever discovered. By reconstructing the bone, they calculated that its owner stood just 100 centimeters tall, 3 feet 3 inches, 6 centimeters shorter than Flo. Crucially, they put the bone under a microscope. If this was a child, the bone would show rapid growth and porousness. Instead, it showed clear signs of remodeling, the metabolic process where bone repairs itself over years of adult life. This was a fully grown adult who could look a 3-year-old modern human in the eye. This discovery changed everything. It proved that the hobbits did not shrink slowly over time. They were already tiny 700,000 years ago. This was not a temporary adaptation or a genetic defect. This was a stable, successful evolutionary design that dominated the island for over 500,000 years. But the 2024 study did something else. It linked the teeth from Matamenga directly to Homo erectus. Homo erectus was the titan of the ancient world. They were the first human species to leave Africa, spreading across Asia nearly 2 million years ago. They were tall, averaging 5 feet 6 inches, and strong, with large brains and sophisticated toolkits. So, how did a tall, dominant species turn into a hobbit 3 feet tall? The answer lies in the geography of Indonesia. Flores is located east of the Wallace Line, a deep ocean trench that creates a permanent barrier between the ecosystems of Asia and Australia. Even during the Ice Ages, there was at least 24 kilometers of treacherous open ocean separating Flores from the mainland. For millions of years, this water barrier stopped almost everything. Tigers could not cross, bears could not cross. But around 1 million years ago, Homo erectus crossed. We do not know if they built simple rafts or if a group was swept out to sea on floating vegetation during a tsunami. They washed ashore on Flores, and once they arrived, they entered a world that played by different rules. Flores was an island of monsters. Because there were no large mammalian predators, reptiles ruled. The island was prowled by Komodo dragons and giant monitor lizards. The skies were patrolled by a giant stork that stood 6 feet tall, taller than the humans, and could swallow a baby whole. But the most important factor was food. The island had limited resources. In evolutionary biology, there is a concept called the island rule. When large animals get trapped on islands with limited food and no predators, they shrink. Being big is expensive. You need thousands of calories just to keep a massive body running. If there are no lions to fight, that big body becomes a liability. Individuals who are smaller need less food, survive the famines, and pass on their genes. We see this all over Flores. The island was home to Stegodon, an ancestor of the elephant. On the mainland, they were massive. On Flores, they shrank to the size of a cow. The humans followed the same path. Over hundreds of thousands of years, natural selection brutally optimized them. The tall, calorie-hungry Homo erectus was sculpted down into the efficient, tiny Homo Floresiensis. But here is the detail that keeps anthropologists awake at night. Their brains shrank too. Usually in evolution, brain size is sacred. You can lose muscle, you can lose height, but you do not lose intelligence. Homo Floresiensis lost half of its brain volume. It dropped from 900 cubic centimeters for Homo erectus to 400 cubic centimeters, about the size of a chimpanzee brain. By all logic, they should have become dumb. They should have lost the ability to make tools or use fire. But they did not. The 2024 study confirms that despite the tiny brain size, these humans were making complex tools, knapping stone into sharp blades to butcher meat. They used fire to cook. They coordinated hunts to take down the dwarf elephants. How is that possible? Scan analysis of Flo's skull reveals the answer. While the overall volume shrank, the internal structure did not become primitive. It reorganized. The frontal lobes, specifically Brodmann Area 10, associated with planning and foresight, remained highly developed and folded. They essentially swapped a supercomputer for a smartphone. The hardware got smaller, but the software remained advanced. This proves that being human is not about having a giant head. It is about how your neurons are wired. For 650,000 years, they thrived. They outlived their ancestors. They survived volcanic eruptions. They held their own against dragons. Then, 50,000 years ago, they vanished. The timing is suspicious. This is exactly when Homo sapiens, modern humans, arrived in island Southeast Asia. Did we wipe them out? Did we outcompete them for the limited stegodon meat? Or did they succumb to a changing climate? There is no evidence of a massacre, no spear points in Hobbit bones, just a sudden silence in the fossil record. But local legends suggest the memory of them might have lingered. The Naj people of Flores tell stories of Ebu Gogo, small, hairy, grandmother-like creatures who lived in the caves of the volcano. They were said to be fast runners who mumbled in a strange language and stole crops. According to folklore, the Ebu Gogo were still alive when the Portuguese arrived in the 16th century. While scientists are cautious about treating myths as history, the description is eerily close to what we now know Homo Floresiensis looked like. It raises the tantalizing possibility that two human species shared this island until very recently. The discovery of the arm bone in August 2024 closed the book on the controversy. Homo Floresiensis was real, it was ancient, and it was a masterpiece of evolutionary adaptation. But it also forces us to be humble. For a century, we drew the march of progress, the image of an ape slowly standing up and becoming the tall, suit-wearing human. We thought we were the inevitable goal of evolution. The Hobbits prove that evolution does not care about our ego. It does not care about progress. It cares about survival. Sometimes the best way to survive is not to get bigger and stronger. Sometimes it is to get smaller, need less, and hide in a cave on an island at the edge of the world. And the scariest part? We only found them 20 years ago. The human family tree is not a straight line. It is a dense, messy bush filled with failed experiments and successful weirdos. It makes you wonder, in the thousands of unexplored caves across the islands of Southeast Asia, what other lost cousins are waiting for us to find them. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden branches of our family tree, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next discovery. This is Strata Files.